They laughed about my mother like she was a punchline. They raised their glasses and made jokes in front of 100 people, mocking the woman who gave everything to help them. And my fiancée? She smiled through it all. My name is Callum Price, and this is the story of how I called off my wedding, publicly, permanently, because the people I was about to marry into didn't just disrespect me. They mocked the dead. This isn't a story about heartbreak. Not really. It's about boundaries, about dignity, and about standing up for the people who no longer can. It's about knowing when to walk away, even when you've already walked halfway down the aisle. Because some moments demand more than silence. Some moments demand that you say, "Enough!" I didn't just lose my fiancé that night. I lost the illusion that silence buys peace. And I found something better, something that looked a lot like self-respect. My mother's name was Irene Price, and if there's one thing I know for certain in this life, it's that I wouldn't be who I am without her. She wasn't loud or flashy. She didn't demand attention or ever talk about what she did for people. But she showed up, again and again, for the people who needed her, including the family I almost married into. She raised me as a single parent after my dad left when I was 10. We didn't have much, but what we had, she turned into more. Irene worked as a nurse for 30 years, ran a church pantry on weekends, and somehow still made time to sit with me on the floor and help with my science projects. She had this quiet strength, the kind that didn't need applause, the kind that just did the right thing, even when no one noticed. Cancer took her after a 4-year fight. It started as a shadow on an X-ray and ended with her in hospice care, eyes sunken, voice weak, but still asking if I'd eaten. That was my mom. Even in pain, she worried about others. And yet, when she died, the only people who truly understood what the world had lost were those who saw what she did behind the scenes. Lydia's family? They acted like her passing was just another calendar event. They showed up to the funeral in their designer black, nodded politely, and left early to beat traffic. They never spoke about what she did for them, never mentioned how, when Lydia's family restaurant was days away from shutting down, my mother was the one who co-signed their loan. She believed in second chances and never once asked for repayment. She even helped restructure their books, guided them through payroll chaos, and when their industrial oven blew out, she paid for the new one herself. All while secretly juggling hospital bills she didn't tell me about until the end. And it didn't stop with money. When Lydia's brother Ryan couldn't afford his last semester of college, she covered his tuition without blinking. When he needed someone to watch his kids so he could study for finals, she offered before anyone asked. You'd think these people, Jack, Donna, even Ryan, would remember her name with some reverence. But no, they spoke of her, if at all, like she was background noise. And Lydia? She never really saw my mother for who she was. She tolerated her, smiled through visits, called her too involved when she thought I wasn't listening. Still, I loved Lydia. I made excuses for her family. I told myself that marrying someone meant accepting where they came from, even if it didn't look like what I grew up with. Irene would have told me to keep my heart open, but to never let anyone step on it. I wish I'd listened sooner. When I proposed to Lydia, it felt right. Or maybe I just wanted it to feel right. I gave her my grandmother's ring, the same one Irene had worn after my grandfather died. She smiled, said yes, and for a moment I believed everything would fall into place. But things didn't fall into place. They cracked quietly, and I didn't notice, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I should have known things were going wrong when I started feeling like a guest at my own wedding. At first, it was subtle. Lydia and I were neck-deep in planning. Guest lists, venue scouting, color palettes. We were sitting in her parents' living room, surrounded by Donna's wedding magazines and Jack's unsolicited financial advice. They had an opinion about everything. Donna wanted the flowers to be elevated and elegant, whatever that meant, and Jack insisted we have valet parking because no one respectable parks their own car anymore. I kept biting my tongue. I told myself they were just excited, just trying to help. But I started to notice a pattern. Every suggestion I made, shot down. Every time I wanted to include something that reflected my side of the family, or worse, my mother, it was met with silence or a sharp pivot. I asked if we could reserve an empty chair in the front row, with one of my mom's favorite scarves draped over it. Something simple. A quiet tribute. Lydia looked up from her phone and said, "Callum, I get it. But do you really want to make people cry at the wedding? I want this to be a celebration." A celebration. As if grief had an expiration date. As if including my mother's memory would somehow ruin the champagne. I let it go. I started letting a lot of things go. When the caterer presented a tasting menu, and I asked if we could incorporate one of my mom's recipes, her rosemary biscuits, the ones she used to make for every holiday, Donna blinked and said, "Those sound rustic," then turned back to the chef and said, "Let's stick with the truffle risotto." I was being erased, gently, politely, and completely. And Lydia? She wasn't cruel. She wasn't dismissive in a way you could point to and say, "Look at that." But every time I raised a concern, she deflected. "My parents are just trying to help. You're overthinking it. Let's just get through the next few weeks." She kept telling me to keep the peace. But peace for who? 1 week before the rehearsal dinner, we were at her parents' house reviewing the seating chart. I suggested putting my aunt and cousin closer to the front, since they were traveling from out of state. Donna looked up and said, "I think they'll be just fine where they are. We've arranged the tables to reflect significance." I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. But I knew it was another way of saying, "Your people aren't our priority." That same night, I mentioned again that I wanted to incorporate something small in the decor to honor my mom. A framed photo, her favorite lilies. Just something. Donna flipped a page in her binder and muttered, "Irene had interesting taste, but this is Lydia's wedding. Let's keep it current." Lydia sat beside her and kept scrolling through Pinterest. Didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't say a damn thing. I went home that night with a pit in my stomach. I stared at my mom's keepsake box, the one I'd tucked away in my closet after she died. It held her letters, some photos, a worn silk handkerchief, and a locket that had been passed down for generations. She gave it to me before she passed, told me, "One day you'll know the right person to give this to." And for months, I thought that person was Lydia. But I hadn't touched the box in weeks. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be the bridge. The moment where our families came together and finally shared something joyful. I wanted it to go well. I needed it to go well. And when Jack and Donna offered to host it at an upscale restaurant they had connections with, I agreed. Maybe it was naivety. Maybe it was the part of me still holding on. I convinced myself it was a gesture of goodwill. That they were trying. I didn't realize I was handing them the stage. The rehearsal dinner was held at this over-the-top venue that screamed prestige. Crystal chandeliers, custom floral centerpieces, a string quartet by the bar. It was everything Lydia's parents had ever wanted. A stage, not a celebration. And from the second we walked in, I felt like a prop. I looked around the room and saw mostly unfamiliar faces. Jack and Donna had packed the place with business partners, distant cousins, people who couldn't have picked Lydia out of a police lineup. My side of the family? A scattering of seats in the corner. My dad, my younger sister, a couple of lifelong friends. We didn't fit in, and we weren't meant to. I pulled Lydia aside and asked why more of my family wasn't there. She gave a tired shrug. "Your side's smaller, babe. My parents needed to fill the room. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. That was her line for everything. The night moved forward like a play with one act too many. Food was served. Toasts were made. Jack and Donna buzzed through the room, playing host with fake laughs and tighter smiles. Every time I caught Jack making another comment about how he pulled strings to get this reservation, I felt my chest tighten. Then the speeches started. Jack was first. He strutted up to the mic like he was about to give a TED Talk, cleared his throat, raised his glass, and said, "Tonight is about the union of two families, our Lydia and, of course, Callum." He said my name like he'd just bitten into something sour. He went on and on about Lydia, how she was ambitious, driven, brilliant. "She's always reached for the stars," he said, "and now she's marrying someone who'll keep her grounded." The smirk that followed wasn't subtle. A few people chuckled. I didn't. He told a story about how Lydia used to color-code her books as a child, and how he and Donna always guided her brilliance. Then, like it was nothing, he said, "We've always told Lydia to aim high, and while Callum might not have been our first vision for her, well, here we are." Another chuckle. A few gasps. I gripped my glass so tight my knuckles turned white. Donna floated up next. She started sweetly enough, talking about how proud she was, how much Lydia deserved happiness. Then the mask started to slip. "Lydia has the patience of a saint," she said, "and she's already taught Callum so much about class and taste." More laughter. She turned to me and added, "We're just so thrilled to welcome someone into the family who doesn't mind rolling up his sleeves. That's hard to find these days." I stared at her, wondering if she even realized how insulting she was. Then I looked at Lydia. She was smiling, laughing even. I waited, just for a flicker of discomfort on her face, some silent signal that she knew this wasn't okay. It never came. Then Jack took the mic again. "Before we wrap," he said, "I want to acknowledge someone important who couldn't be with us tonight. Callum's mother, Irene. For a breath, I thought, maybe, finally, something kind was coming. But of course not. She was one of a kind," he said. "Always had an opinion, didn't she? Loved to insert herself into everything. God bless her. She just couldn't help it." He chuckled. So did Donna. "Oh, she definitely had a presence," Donna added. "Always helping us, even when we didn't ask." There it was. Laughter, polite, awkward, and spreading. They were mocking my mother, a woman who paid for their failing restaurant's equipment, who covered Ryan's tuition, who babysat their grandkids, a woman they wouldn't even have a livelihood without. "She was generous to a fault," Jack said. "Sometimes. Maybe a little too much." Then he winked. That was it. That wink broke something in me. I glanced at Lydia. She leaned toward me and said with a giggle, "Oh, Dad, stop!" Like it was all harmless fun. Harmless fun. I stood up. My chair scraped across the marble floor, loud enough to silence the laughter. "Are you serious right now?" I said. Jack paused, blinking. Donna turned toward me with that sweet smile she wore like a mask. "Oh, Callum, don't be so sensitive. We were just sharing memories." "You mocked her," I said. "You took everything she ever gave your family, and you turned her into a punchline." Jack leaned back, arms crossed. "Relax. It was all in good fun." "Good fun?" My voice cracked with disbelief. "You called her meddling. You ridiculed her generosity. That wasn't humor. That was cruelty dressed up in a tuxedo." Lydia touched my arm. "Callum, please, let's talk outside." I pulled away. "No," I said. "We're going to talk right here, because your parents just stood in front of everyone and disrespected the only person who ever gave a damn about this wedding without asking for anything in return. And you? You laughed." Gasps spread across the room. My sister was on her feet, glaring. My father didn't move, but his fists were clenched on the table. Donna tried again, this time with pity in her voice. "Michael, this is supposed to be a happy occasion. Don't ruin it." "I didn't ruin anything," I said, my voice ice cold. "You did, when you spat on my mother's memory." I walked out of that room without another word. But I wasn't done, not yet. The air outside was cold, but I didn't notice. My heart was pounding, my jaw locked. I stood on the curb, hands shaking, not with regret, but rage. And grief. I could have stayed out there, vanished. But then I thought of my mom, of how she believed silence in the face of cruelty was betrayal. So I went back in. The room had calmed to a murmur. When people saw me, it stopped. I walked past Lydia, still stunned, and went straight to the front. "Excuse me," I said loudly. "I have something I need to say. This wedding is off." Gasps. Lydia stood up. "Callum, no!" I raised a hand. "This isn't a discussion. It's a decision." I turned to the crowd. "I cannot marry into a family that mocks the dead, dismisses the living, and disguises cruelty as charm. My mother gave everything to this family, and they spat on her name." Jack muttered something, but I didn't care. "She was too generous? That's your insult? I was raised better than this." Then I turned to Lydia. You had a choice. You chose silence. I choose to walk away. And I did. The next morning, my phone exploded. Lydia begged. Donna said I humiliated them. Jack said I'd burned bridges. I didn't respond. By afternoon, Lydia showed up. She looked exhausted. Callum, please, we need to talk. No, Lydia, we don't. I didn't know they'd say all that, she whispered. But you laughed, I said. You didn't flinch. You didn't defend her. I was scared, she said, to confront them, to cause a scene. You weren't the only one with something to lose, I said. But you stood by and let them turn my mother into a joke. I can fix this, she pleaded. I shook my head. You can't fix what you revealed. She cried. I closed the door. I thought that was the end. But days later, I opened my mother's keepsake box. Her locket, gone. I searched everything. Only one person had been in my apartment since, Lydia. She'd asked to use the bathroom when she dropped off the ring. I texted her, "Did you take the locket?" She replied, "What are you talking about?" I pressed. She confessed, "I borrowed it. I wanted to feel close to you." My blood boiled. "Where is it?" "At my parents' house," she wrote. That was it. I drove over. Donna opened the door, her fake smile gone. "I'm here for the locket," I said. Lydia came down, eyes swollen, holding it like it was cheap jewelry. I took it. "You didn't just insult my mother," I told her. "You stole from her memory." She started crying again. I left. And that was the real ending. Not the dinner, not the wedding, but that moment. Me holding what was left of my mother and walking away from everything that tried to strip her dignity. In the days after, I blocked them all. And for the first time in months, I opened one of my mom's favorite books, sat in silence, and felt peace. Grief is strange. It doesn't disappear. It just gets quieter. Some days it sits in your chest like a brick, other days like a feather. But in the silence that followed everything, I realized something. I wasn't just grieving my mother anymore. I was grieving who I thought Lydia was, who I thought I was when I was with her. But pain has a way of clarifying things. I kept replaying that night at the rehearsal dinner, not to torture myself, but to remind myself that I had chosen something different. I had chosen to honor my mother, to stand by her when no one else in the room had the decency to. It would have been easier to stay seated, to smile through the humiliation, to not cause a scene. But easy is not the same as right. And I finally understood what my mother meant when she said, "Doing the right thing rarely feels good at first, but it always feels clean later." Clean. That's the word I keep coming back to. Not triumphant, not even proud, just clean. Like I washed off years of quiet compromise. I don't know what Lydia tells people now. I'm sure in her version, I overreacted. Maybe I did. But I can live with that. What I couldn't live with was sitting at that wedding, smiling while everyone pretended nothing had happened. I still wear the locket sometimes, just for a moment, just long enough to remember. And then I tuck it back into the box, close the lid, and move forward. Because I didn't lose something when I walked away from that family. I reclaimed something, me.